My name is Samantha Reynolds, and on my 28th birthday, my father demanded I sign over my entire $500,000 inheritance to my stepsister Rebecca. Your mother would have wanted this, he insisted, while Rebecca sat there dripping in diamonds bought with borrowed money. I was the forgotten daughter facing the golden child. When I refused, they didn't just get angry. They tried to declare me mentally incompetent. I stayed silent while they plotted, until I handed them one envelope that changed everything. Before I tell you what happened, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to family who tried to take advantage of you. Growing up, I never doubted I was loved. My mother, Eleanor, was my rock, a brilliant financial advisor who taught me the value of independence and smart money management. She'd survived breast cancer when I was 10, and that experience shaped her approach to life. Always have your own safety net, Sammy, she'd tell me. No matter how much you love someone, protect yourself first. We were a small but happy family, Mom, Dad, and me. Dad worked in real estate development, and while he wasn't as financially savvy as Mom, they seemed to balance each other well. I remember weekend picnics at the lake, board game nights, and Dad teaching me to ride a bike. Normal, happy family stuff. Everything changed when Mom's cancer returned when I was 16. This time, it was aggressive and spread quickly. Within 6 months, she was gone. I was devastated, clinging to memories of her smile, her laugh, the way she'd tuck my hair behind my ear when she was proud of me. What I didn't know then was that Mom had prepared for this possibility. She'd set up a trust fund for me that would mature when I turned 28. It contained $500,000, her life insurance policy, some investments she'd made specifically for me, and family money she'd inherited from her parents. Dad was aware of it but couldn't touch it. It was specifically designated for me, with clear instructions that it was meant to secure my future. Dad seemed to grieve deeply after Mom died. For about 3 months. Then Diane entered our lives. Diane Mitchell was Mom's complete opposite: loud where Mom had been thoughtful, flashy where Mom had been elegant, demanding where Mom had been patient. She worked at Dad's office as an administrative assistant, and apparently, they'd been comforting each other during Mom's illness. I later discovered their relationship had started well before Mom passed away. They married just 8 months after we buried my mother. And with Diane came her daughter, Rebecca. Rebecca was exactly my age, which made the whole situation even more uncomfortable. Where I was studious and reserved, Rebecca was social and outgoing. She had bleached blonde hair, wore designer clothes, and seemed to have mastered the art of getting whatever she wanted from adults, especially my father. The change in Dad was almost immediate and shocking. It was like watching someone transform into a stranger. The man who had once beamed with pride when I brought home straight A's now barely noticed my academic achievements. Instead, he lavished attention on Rebecca, praising her mediocre grades, buying her a car for her 17th birthday. I'd received money for college when I turned 17, and always taking her side in any disagreement. Rebecca's just more delicate than you, Samantha, he'd say when I questioned the double standards. You've always been so independent, like your mother. Rebecca needs more support. By the time I graduated high school, I was essentially living as a guest in what had once been my home. I earned a scholarship to a state university 2 hours away and rarely came home except for major holidays. Working part-time jobs and summer internships, I put myself through college with minimal help from Dad, despite his comfortable financial situation. Meanwhile, Rebecca attended a private college paid for entirely by my father. She joined a sorority, drove a new car, and posted endless photos of spring break trips to Cancun and weekend shopping sprees in Chicago. All funded by Dad. I majored in finance, following in my mother's footsteps. After graduation, I secured a position at a respected financial firm in the city. I rented a modest apartment, saved diligently, and built my career step by step. For 3 years, I worked overtime, took on extra projects, and gradually earned promotions. Family holidays became increasingly uncomfortable as the contrast between my practical lifestyle and Rebecca's extravagance grew more pronounced. "Still driving that old Honda, Samantha?" Rebecca would smirk, dangling her keys to whatever new vehicle Dad had purchased for her. "It gets me where I need to go," I'd respond, not mentioning that I was debt-free while she had never paid a bill in her life. 2 months before my 28th birthday, I received a letter from the trust manager my mother had appointed. The inheritance would be available on my birthday, exactly as Mom had planned. The letter included a note she'd written years ago. "My dearest Samantha, if you're reading this, I'm not there to see the amazing woman you've become. This money represents my love and my desire to see you build a secure future on your own terms. Be wise with it, but also allow yourself some joy. I'm so proud of you. All my love, Mom." I cried for hours after reading that note. It felt like receiving one last hug from her. I began making careful plans for the money, investing in a small business opportunity I'd been researching, making a down payment on a modest house, and setting aside a portion for retirement. Practical choices that would have made Mom proud. What I didn't know was that as I was planning my future, my father, Diane, and Rebecca were making very different plans for my inheritance. "We want to host your birthday dinner," Dad announced over the phone 3 weeks before my 28th birthday. "It's a milestone year." I was surprised. My birthday hadn't been a priority in the Reynolds-Mitchell household for years. Last year, I'd received a text message from Dad and a generic gift card that still had the activation sticker on it. "That's thoughtful, but you don't need to make a big deal," I said cautiously. "Nonsense," he insisted. "You only turned 28 once." I thought his wording was strange. 28 isn't typically considered a milestone birthday, but I agreed to the dinner. Perhaps he was making an effort to reconnect. Despite everything, I still wanted a relationship with my father. I arrived at their suburban mansion, the third they'd upgraded to since Dad married Diane, on my birthday evening. The house was a monument to excess: marble flooring, crystal chandeliers, and furniture that looked impressive but uncomfortable. My practical Honda Civic looked out of place next to Dad's Mercedes and Diane's Range Rover in the circular driveway. Dad greeted me with an enthusiastic hug that felt rehearsed. "There's my birthday girl," he exclaimed, as if we regularly celebrated special occasions together. Diane air-kissed near my cheeks, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "Samantha, darling, that outfit is practical." She was wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. The dining room was decorated with a few half-hearted balloons and a store-bought cake with "Happy Birthday, Samantha" spelled correctly, which was actually an improvement from previous years. A small stack of wrapped presents sat on a side table. "Who else is coming?" I asked, noticing the table was set for 5 people. "Just us, plus Rebecca and her new boyfriend, Tyler," Dad replied. "A small family celebration." As if on cue, the front door opened and Rebecca's laughter echoed through the foyer. She entered the dining room like a celebrity arriving at a premiere, tossing her designer handbag onto a chair. She wore a red dress that hugged her curves, diamond earrings that caught the light, and a matching tennis bracelet that looked brand new. "Happy birthday, sis," she said, giving me a quick hug that smelled of expensive perfume. "You look nice." Her eyes assessed my simple blue dress from a department store. Her boyfriend Tyler followed behind her. He was tall, conventionally handsome, and looked like he spent considerable time at the gym. He gave me a firm handshake and a practiced smile. "So you're the smart sister," he said, which felt like both a compliment and a way of categorizing me as the less attractive option. As we moved to the living room for pre-dinner drinks, I noticed subtle exchanges of glances between Dad and Diane. When Dad handed me a glass of wine, his hand shook slightly. Rebecca dominated the conversation, talking about her new job at a boutique marketing firm where she seemed to do very little actual work for an impressive salary. "Daddy pulled some strings with the owner," she explained, not even attempting to hide the nepotism. I talked briefly about my recent promotion and the new team I was managing at work, but Dad quickly changed the subject to ask Tyler about his golf game. When we moved to the dining room for dinner, I noticed my gifts remained unopened on the side table. No one suggested I open them. "We'll do presents after dinner," Diane said, following my gaze. "Once we've had our discussion." The word hung in the air ominously. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Throughout the first course, a tension pervaded the room. Dad kept checking his watch. Diane refilled her wine glass 3 times. Rebecca and Tyler exchanged whispers when they thought no one was looking. I caught fragments of hushed conversations when I returned from a brief trip to the bathroom. "Just make sure she understands there's no other option," Dad was saying. "But what if she won't?" Diane responded. They fell silent when I re-entered the room. During the main course, Rebecca suddenly excused herself, returning several minutes later with reddened eyes. Tyler placed his hand over hers in what appeared to be a gesture of support. "Is everything okay?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "Everything's fine," Dad answered before Rebecca could speak. "Let's enjoy this lovely dinner Diane has arranged." But nothing about the dinner felt lovely. It felt like sitting in a waiting room before receiving bad news. The conversation was stilted, the laughter forced. No one asked me how I felt about turning 28 or mentioned my mother, who should have been there to see this day. When the plates were cleared and Diane brought out the cake, Dad cleared his throat and tapped his water glass with a spoon. The sound rang out like a warning bell. "Before we have cake, I'd like to make a toast," he said, standing up. "To Samantha on her 28th birthday. A day your mother and I looked forward to from the moment you were born." He paused, making deliberate eye contact with me. "As you know, today is significant not just because it marks another year of your life, but because it's the day you gain access to your inheritance." And there it was. The real reason for this unusually attentive birthday celebration. Family, he continued, lifting his glass higher, is all about supporting each other through difficult times. And sometimes, being an adult means making sacrifices for the greater good of those you love. My heart sank as I realized this dinner wasn't a reconciliation. It was an ambush. Dad remained standing, wine glass in hand, as his toast transformed into something else entirely. His expression shifted from celebratory to somber in an instant. "Samantha, we need to have a serious family discussion," he said, setting down his glass. "It's about Rebecca." On cue, Rebecca let out a small sob. Tyler put his arm around her shoulders protectively. "What's going on?" I asked, looking between them. Dad took a deep breath. "Rebecca is in trouble. Serious trouble." "I didn't mean for it to get so out of hand," Rebecca interjected, tears streaming down her face, miraculously not disturbing her perfect makeup. "It started as just a little fun. Rebecca has a gambling problem," Dad explained. "She's been trying to handle it herself, but things have escalated. I'm getting help," she insisted, clutching Tyler's hand. "I've joined a support group and everything." Diane reached across the table to pat Rebecca's other hand. "We're all very proud of her for taking responsibility. The problem," Dad continued, "is that she owes some very dangerous people a significant amount of money." "How much?" I asked, already sensing where this conversation was heading. $500,000, Dad said, maintaining direct eye contact with me. "The exact amount of my inheritance." "What a coincidence." "These aren't people you can negotiate with," Dad explained. "They've already threatened her. Us. The whole family." "I'm so scared," Rebecca whimpered. "They know where I live, where Mom and Dad live." "Which brings me to why we're having this discussion tonight," Dad said, his voice taking on the tone he used for business negotiations. "Your inheritance becomes available today. We need that money to pay off Rebecca's debt and ensure our family's safety." The room fell silent. They were all staring at me, waiting for my response. "You want me to give Rebecca my entire inheritance?" I clarified, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. "Not give," Dad corrected quickly. Loan. Of course, she'll pay you back. Rebecca nodded enthusiastically. Every penny, I promise. Once I'm back on my feet. And how exactly would you pay back $500,000? I asked. With your boutique marketing job? We could work out a payment plan, Dad suggested. The important thing is taking care of this situation immediately. Your mother would have wanted this, Diane added, invoking Mom's memory like she had any right to it. She always said family comes first. My mother said a lot of things, I replied coolly, like, don't enable bad behavior and actions have consequences. Dad's face hardened. This isn't about teaching Rebecca a lesson. This is about keeping her safe. Keeping all of us safe. I find it interesting that in 10 years, you've never once mentioned Rebecca had a gambling addiction, I said. Especially one severe enough to put her $500,000 in debt. It developed recently, Diane said quickly. And yet she's wearing new diamond earrings and bracelet, I observed. Shouldn't she be selling those to pay her debts? Those are family heirlooms, Diane stammered. That you purchased last month, I countered. I saw Rebecca posting about them on Instagram, thanking Daddy for the early birthday present. Dad's expression darkened. The point is, we need that money. Today. I've already contacted the trust manager to expedite the transfer once you sign the authorization. You contacted my trust manager? I was incredulous. Without discussing this with me first? There wasn't time, he insisted. These people want their money now. Who exactly are these people? I asked. If Rebecca is being threatened, shouldn't we contact the police? We can't involve authorities, Dad said dismissively. It would only make things worse. I've prepared the paperwork, he continued, pulling a folder from beside his chair and sliding it across the table to me. All you need to do is sign. I opened the folder. Inside was a transfer authorization form for the entire $500,000, plus a hastily drafted loan agreement that contained no specific repayment terms, interest rates, or consequences for non-payment. You can't be serious, I said, closing the folder. Samantha, Dad leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. This isn't a request. Rebecca's life could be in danger. My life could be in danger. Rebecca added dramatically. You don't need that money, Diane chimed in. You have a good job, no dependents. Rebecca needs this to survive. I looked around the table at their expectant faces, Dad confident that I would cave as I always had. Diane smug in her certainty that her daughter's needs would once again take priority. Rebecca with her crocodile tears and entitlement. Even Tyler, a stranger, watching with interest as this family tried to strip me of my security. No, I said simply. The silence that followed was absolute. What did you say? Dad finally asked, as if he couldn't possibly have heard correctly. I said no. I will not sign over my inheritance to Rebecca. Rebecca's tears stopped instantly, replaced by shock and then fury. You selfish bitch. They'll kill me. Samantha, be reasonable, Dad demanded, his facade of concern cracking. This is your sister. Stepsister, I corrected. Who I barely know because you've spent the last decade treating me like an outsider in my own family. After everything we've done for you, Diane hissed. What exactly have you done for me? I asked genuinely. Since you married my father, what support have you ever shown me? We're family, Dad insisted, ignoring my question. And in this family, we help each other. Funny, that principle never applied when I needed help, I said, standing up. I'm leaving now. Happy birthday to me. If you walk out that door, Dad threatened, you're no longer part of this family. I looked him directly in the eyes. I haven't been part of this family since Mom died. The difference is, now I'm acknowledging it. I walked out, leaving my birthday cake uncut and my meager presents unopened on the side table. As I reached my car, I heard the front door open behind me. You'll regret this, Dad called after me. When something happens to Rebecca, it will be on your conscience. I drove away with tears streaming down my face, not from sadness, but from pure, unadulterated anger. The inheritance wasn't just money to me, It was my mother's final gift, her way of protecting me when she could no longer be there herself. And they had tried to take it from me without a second thought. The week following my disastrous birthday dinner was eerily quiet. No calls from Dad, no texts from Rebecca. Even Diane, who usually enjoyed sending passive-aggressive messages, remained silent. I should have been relieved, but instead, I felt uneasy. This wasn't a retreat, it was a regrouping. I was right to be suspicious. 8 days after my birthday, as I was leaving work, I found my father waiting beside my car in the office parking garage. "We need to talk," he said grimly. "Not here. Let's go somewhere private." "Whatever you have to say, you can say it here," I replied, keeping my distance. He sighed heavily, projecting disappointment. "I was hoping to do this civilly." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. "These are legal documents I'm filing tomorrow. I wanted to give you one last chance to cooperate before things get ugly." I took the envelope, but didn't open it. "What kind of documents?" "A petition for guardianship," he said matter-of-factly. "On the grounds that you're mentally unfit to manage your financial affairs." My blood ran cold. "You can't be serious." "Your mother had several episodes of depression after her first cancer diagnosis," he continued. "It's well documented in her medical records. Mental illness can be hereditary. You displayed increasing paranoia, irrational decision-making, and emotional instability, all signs that you're experiencing a similar crisis." "That's completely fabricated," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Is it? You accused your family of lying about a serious threat without evidence. You've isolated yourself from us for years. You refused reasonable financial help to a sibling in danger. A judge might see those as concerning behaviors." "Get away from me," I managed to say, clutching my car keys tightly. "This can all go away, Samantha," he said softly. "Just sign over the inheritance, and we can forget this unpleasantness." I got into my car without another word and drove straight to Martin Sullivan, my mother's longtime lawyer who had helped set up my trust. His office was closing, but his assistant let me in when she saw my distressed state. "He's claiming I'm mentally incompetent," I explained, handing over the documents. "He wants control of my inheritance." Martin reviewed the papers, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "This is aggressive. He's assembled quite a case here, statements from family members, a psychiatric evaluation from a doctor you've apparently never met, examples of supposedly erratic behavior." "None of it's true," I insisted. "I believe you," Martin assured me. "But these allegations, however false, can create legal complications. Courts tend to be cautious when mental competency is questioned. Even if we ultimately win, your father could potentially get a temporary freeze on your assets while the case is decided. So he could block my access to the inheritance?" "Potentially, yes. At least temporarily." "Why would he go to these lengths?" I asked, bewildered. "Is Rebecca's gambling debt really worth destroying our relationship forever?" Martin looked uncomfortable. "Samantha, I wasn't going to bring this up until I had more information, but your father has attempted something similar before." "What? With whom?" "Your maternal grandmother. After your mother died, there was a dispute over some property she had inherited from her parents. Your father tried to claim your mother had promised it to him verbally before her death. When your grandmother refused to sign it over, he threatened similar legal action." I felt sick. "What happened?" "Your grandmother came to me. We fought it, and your father eventually backed down. But it was ugly. She never spoke to him again." "Why didn't anyone tell me this?" "You were 17. Everyone wanted to protect you from the fallout." Martin sighed. "There's something else. After reviewing the documents your father submitted, I took the liberty of calling a few people. This isn't about gambling debts." "Then what is it about?" "Based on what I've pieced together, your father and Diane have been living beyond their means for years. His real estate business took a major hit during the last economic downturn. They've remortgaged their house twice. There are multiple credit cards maxed out. And Rebecca has indeed been spending extravagantly, but on shopping, not gambling. So they're just desperate for money? It appears so. Your inheritance may be their last hope of avoiding bankruptcy. I sat back, trying to absorb this information. What do I do now? First, we secure your inheritance immediately. I'll transfer it to accounts they can't access, even with a court order. Then, we gather evidence to counter their claims about your mental state, statements from your employer, friends, a psychiatric evaluation from a reputable doctor. And then we prepare for battle, Martin said grimly. Because your father doesn't seem likely to back down. Over the next several weeks, my life became a surreal nightmare. I received notice that my father had indeed filed for guardianship. I was forced to undergo a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation, which I passed with flying colors. My boss provided statements about my exemplary work performance and sound judgment. Friends testified about my stable and responsible character. Meanwhile, I hired a private investigator who uncovered disturbing information. Rebecca's supposed gambling addiction was entirely fabricated. Instead, credit card statements showed she had spent hundreds of thousands on designer clothes, luxury vacations, and cosmetic procedures over the past 5 years. Dad and Diane had been supporting this lifestyle while gradually depleting their savings and accumulating massive debt. More disturbingly, I wasn't the first family member they had targeted. After my grandmother, they had attempted similar maneuvers with 2 of my mother's cousins who had received smaller inheritances. One had given in and handed over the money. The other had fought and won, but at great personal cost. There was a pattern here, a systematic exploitation of family connections for financial gain. And I had been next on their list. The stress took its toll. I had trouble sleeping, lost weight, and jumped whenever my phone rang. But I also found unexpected strength. Colleagues at work rallied around me. Old friends I'd lost touch with reached out with support. Even my grandmother's sister, Aunt Sarah, whom I barely knew, called to offer both emotional and financial backing for my legal fight. Your mother would be so proud of you for standing up to them, she told me. Eleanor always knew Richard had a weak character, but she loved him despite it. She'd be heartbroken to see what he's become, but so proud of the woman you are. As the evidence mounted and my legal position strengthened, I made a decision. I wouldn't just defend myself, I would expose everything. Every manipulation, every lie, every attempt to exploit family members. Working with Martin and the investigator, I compiled a comprehensive dossier, financial records, legal documents, witness statements, even recordings of my father and Diane discussing their plans, legally obtained by the investigator. I had my mother's original will with specific instructions about the inheritance and her wishes. I had statements from the doctor who had supposedly evaluated me, confirming he had never met me and his signature had been forged. I had credit card statements showing Rebecca's spending spree the very day after my birthday dinner, when she was supposedly in fear for her life. Most damning of all, I had a recorded conversation between my father and a business associate where he explicitly discussed his plan to get control of Samantha's money before she wastes it, and how he would use it to clear the debts and get back on solid ground. All of this went into what I began to think of as the envelope, though it had grown to fill an entire accordion file. The final piece came when Rebecca's boyfriend Tyler unexpectedly contacted me. They had broken up, and he was angry about how she had manipulated him. The whole gambling debt thing was a complete lie, he confirmed. She coached me on what to say at your birthday dinner. There were never any dangerous people or threats. It was all to pressure you into handing over the money. His statement, notarized and added to my growing file, was the final nail in their coffin. Now I was ready for the confrontation that would end this once and for all. With Martin Sullivan's guidance, I embarked on a methodical investigation that consumed the next 3 weeks of my life. We needed to not only defend against my father's guardianship petition, but also build an airtight case exposing the true nature of their scheme. Documentation is everything, Martin advised. Courts deal in evidence, not emotions. I started by examining my own financial records, gathering proof of my consistent, responsible money management. Bank statements showed regular savings. Investment accounts demonstrated prudent growth strategies. Bill payments were always on time. This would counter any claim that I was financially irresponsible. Next came professional documentation. My supervisor at work, Jessica, provided a detailed letter outlining my job performance, recent promotion, and leadership capabilities. Samantha is one of our most level-headed and analytical team members, she wrote. Her judgment in complex financial matters is exceptional. 3 colleagues submitted similar statements. My annual performance reviews, all excellent, were added to the file. For personal character evidence, 5 close friends wrote letters describing my stable, rational behavior, and sound decision-making. My neighbor, a retired psychologist, provided a particularly valuable statement about our regular interactions and his professional assessment of my mental stability. In my 40 years of clinical practice, I observed many individuals with genuine competency issues, he wrote. Samantha displays none of these characteristics. Rather, she exemplifies emotional intelligence and mature judgment. With my own defense established, I turned to investigating my father's claims. The psychiatric evaluation he had submitted was supposedly performed by Dr. Harold Winters. Through Martin's contacts, we discovered Dr. Winters had retired 2 years earlier and moved to Arizona. A quick phone call confirmed he had never met me, examined me, or signed any evaluation. Someone forged my signature, he said, outraged. I'll sign an affidavit to that effect immediately. The forgery alone was enough to undermine my father's case, but we were just getting started. Martin connected me with a financial investigator named Michael Grayson, who specialized in uncovering hidden assets and financial fraud. Michael's expertise proved invaluable as we began examining my father's finances. Most people leave paper trails they don't even realize, Michael explained as we pored over documents in his office. Credit card statements, property records, tax filings, they tell a story if you know how to read them. The story that emerged was one of financial desperation. Dad's real estate development company had been struggling for years. He had leveraged the business heavily before the last recession, and when the market turned, he was caught with several half-completed projects and mounting debt. Rather than scaling back their lifestyle, Dad and Diane had doubled down, taking out second and third mortgages on their home, opening multiple credit cards, and even borrowing against Dad's life insurance policy, all to maintain the facade of success and wealth. Rebecca's spending was particularly shocking. In the past year alone, she had purchased a $12,000 Chanel handbag, over $45,000 in designer clothing, $30,000 in jewelry, including those heirloom diamonds, 5 luxury spa weekends at $5,000 each, a 2-week vacation in the Maldives costing $35,000, monthly cosmetic procedures averaging $3,000, all funded by credit cards in my father's name. There's no gambling problem, Michael confirmed. I've checked casino records, online gambling sites, everything. No evidence of substantial gambling activity from Rebecca or anyone in the household. So they just made it up? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Entirely fabricated, he nodded. A convenient story to explain the urgent need for your money. Through careful investigation, we also uncovered my father's previous attempts to appropriate family funds. After my maternal grandmother, he had targeted my mother's cousin Edward, claiming a verbal agreement about shared business investments. Edward had reluctantly handed over his modest inheritance of $75,000 to help the family and never saw a penny returned. Another cousin, Patricia, had fought back when Dad attempted a similar scheme with her inheritance. Dad had threatened legal action then too, but eventually backed down when Patricia's lawyer presented evidence contradicting his claims. I managed to contact both relatives, who provided detailed statements about their experiences. Patricia hadn't spoken to my father in 8 years. I tried to warn your grandmother about him after your mother died, Patricia told me during our phone call. She was too trusting. Eleanor, too. They both wanted to see the best in Richard. The most disturbing discovery came when we obtained access to my father's email through legal discovery procedures. In an exchange with Diane just days before my birthday, he had written, "Once we get control of Samantha's inheritance, we'll clear the credit cards and the second mortgage. That should give us breathing room. Rebecca needs to lay low with the spending for a while, at least until things settle down." Diane had responded, "What if she won't sign it over? She's stubborn like Eleanor." Dad, then we go with Plan B, the guardianship petition. I've already spoken with Dr. Reynolds about the psychiatric evaluation. He owes me a favor from the Anderson development deal. Diane, will that work? She seems perfectly sane to me, just selfish. Dad, it doesn't matter if it ultimately works. The process will freeze her assets while the court decides. That gives us time to pressure her into settling. She'll give in rather than go through a humiliating court battle. Reading those cold, calculating words from my own father made me physically ill. I had to step outside Michael's office and breathe deeply to regain my composure. "I'm sorry," Michael said when I returned. "I know this must be incredibly painful." "It is," I admitted. "But it also confirms what I need to know. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a deliberate, premeditated attempt to steal my inheritance." As our investigation continued, we made contact with Tyler, Rebecca's now ex-boyfriend. Their relationship had soured shortly after my birthday dinner, and he was eager to set the record straight. The whole thing was rehearsed, he revealed during our meeting at Martin's office. Rebecca coached me on what to say, how to act concerned. There was never any gambling debt or dangerous people threatening her. She actually laughed about it afterward, saying how gullible you'd be. Tyler provided text messages from Rebecca discussing their performance at the dinner and complaining when their plan didn't work. Samantha was supposed to be the easy mark, she had written. Dad said she always caves when he pressures her. With all this evidence compiled, I met with Dr. Catherine Jenkins, a respected psychiatrist recommended by Martin, for a comprehensive mental health evaluation. Her conclusion was definitive. I showed no signs of any mental health condition that would impair my judgment or financial decision-making capabilities. In fact, Dr. Jenkins wrote in her report, "Ms. Reynolds demonstrates remarkable emotional resilience given the family dynamics described. Her decision to protect her inheritance shows appropriate boundary setting, not instability." By the end of the 3 weeks, my accordion file contained proof of my financial responsibility and mental competence, evidence of the forged psychiatric evaluation, documentation of my father's financial desperation, records of Rebecca's extravagant spending, statements from relatives about previous inheritance schemes, emails showing premeditation in the plot against me, Tyler's testimony about the fabricated gambling story, Dr. Jenkins' professional assessment of my mental health. I also had my mother's original letter, emphasizing her specific wishes for the inheritance to secure my future. The contrast between her loving intentions and my father's callous plot couldn't have been more stark. "What happens now?" I asked Martin during our final preparatory meeting. "Your father has requested a family meeting to discuss your condition," he replied. "He's invited several extended family members, presumably to increase the pressure on you. And we're going to this ambush because..." Martin smiled for the first time in weeks. "Because it's the perfect opportunity to present our evidence. Not just to a judge in a sterile courtroom, but to the family members he's been manipulating. Sometimes public exposure is more effective than legal victory. Will you come with me?" I asked. "I'll be right beside you," he promised. "But you won't need me much. You've built an ironclad case, Samantha. And more importantly, you've found your voice. Your mother would be incredibly proud." I left his office feeling both apprehensive and strangely calm. The evidence was organized, the statements collected, the facts irrefutable. I had spent weeks preparing for this confrontation, and now I was ready. The envelope that had grown into an accordion file was now condensed into a sleek presentation folder containing only the most damning evidence, organized for maximum impact. I placed it in my briefcase alongside copies of my mother's will and trust documents. Tomorrow, I would face my father, Diane, and Rebecca with the truth, and nothing would ever be the same again. The family intervention was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at my Aunt Sarah's house, neutral territory, Dad had claimed, though I suspected he simply wanted to create an impression of family consensus against me. I arrived 15 minutes early, accompanied by Martin. We sat in the car reviewing our strategy one final time. Remember, stay calm no matter what they say, Martin advised. The evidence speaks for itself. Don't let them provoke you into an emotional reaction they can later point to as proof of instability. I won't, I promised, though my heart was racing. I'm ready. Aunt Sarah greeted us at the door with a worried expression. She hadn't been told the true purpose of the gathering, only that there were serious concerns about my well-being that needed family discussion. I had no idea Richard would try something like this, she whispered as she hugged me. Your mother would be livid. It's okay, I assured her. Just let everything play out. The living room was arranged like a tribunal. 2 sofas faced a single armchair, clearly intended for me. Dad, Diane, and Rebecca sat on one sofa, with spaces on the other for my distant cousin Thomas and his wife Beth, who had already arrived and looked uncomfortable. Uncle James, my mother's brother, stood by the window, his expression unreadable. Dad rose when I entered with Martin. This is a family meeting, he said, frowning at my lawyer. There's no need for legal representation. Martin is here as a family friend, I replied calmly. He knew my mother for 20 years. He stays. Dad looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. Fine. Please, Samantha, take a seat. I sat in the designated chair, placing my briefcase beside me. Martin stood behind me, a reassuring presence. We've asked you all here because we're deeply concerned about Samantha, Dad began, addressing the room. In recent months, she's shown increasing signs of paranoia, irrational behavior, and poor judgment, similar to what Eleanor experienced during her illness. The mention of my mother in this context made my blood boil, but I maintained my composed expression. Samantha has isolated herself from family, rejected reasonable requests for help, and become fixated on money in an unhealthy way, he continued. We believe she's experiencing a mental health crisis that renders her temporarily incapable of managing her financial affairs. We're only suggesting this guardianship out of love, Diane added, her voice dripping with false concern, to protect Samantha from herself until she gets the help she needs. Rebecca nodded solemnly. We're really worried about you, sis. Dad produced a folder of his own. I have documentation of Samantha's concerning behavior, statements from family members who've witnessed her decline, and a professional psychiatric evaluation recommending temporary guardianship. He handed copies to Uncle James and Cousin Thomas, who began reviewing them with furrowed brows. This is serious, Samantha, Uncle James said, looking up from the papers. Have you seen these assessments? I have, I replied evenly. Would you like to hear my response? Of course, Aunt Sarah said. That's why we're here. I took a deep breath, feeling surprisingly calm. For years, I had let my father and his new family talk over me, dismiss me, and make me doubt myself. Not today. Everything in that folder is a lie, I stated clearly. The psychiatric evaluation is a forgery. The doctor whose signature appears on that document has never met me, never evaluated me, and has signed an affidavit stating his signature was falsified. I removed the affidavit from my briefcase and handed it to Uncle James. Dad's face paled slightly. That's not possible. There must be some mistake. No mistake, I continued. Dr. Harold Winters retired 2 years ago and lives in Arizona now. I spoke with him personally. He was quite upset to learn his professional credentials were being misused. Regardless of any paperwork issues, Diane interjected quickly. Our concerns about your behavior are genuine. Are they? I asked, turning to face her directly. Or is this about something else entirely? I removed another document from my briefcase, a financial summary prepared by Michael Grayson. This is an analysis of my father and Diane's current financial situation, I explained, passing copies around the room. They're over $700,000 in debt. Their house has been remortgaged twice. There are 8 credit cards maxed out. Dad's business is on the verge of bankruptcy. This is an invasion of privacy. Dad sputtered. Financial records become relevant when you're attempting to gain control of someone else's money, Martin spoke up for the first time. Especially when that appears to be your true motivation. I turned to Rebecca next. The gambling addiction you claim to have? Also fiction. I distributed copies of her credit card statements. These show where the money actually went. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, jewelry. All funded by your father, who couldn't afford any of it. Rebecca's face flushed red. You had no right to snoop through my personal expenses. I didn't snoop, I replied calmly. These are all statements from accounts in Dad's name, accounts he's legally responsible for. Accounts he apparently hoped to pay off with my inheritance. The room had gone very quiet. Uncle James was studying the financial documents with increasing concern. Cousin Thomas looked shocked. Aunt Sarah had tears in her eyes. There's more, I continued, removing an email printout. This is an exchange between my father and Diane from 3 days before my birthday. It details their plan to pressure me into signing over my inheritance. And if that failed, to file for guardianship as a way to freeze my assets. I handed the email to Uncle James, who read it silently before passing it to Thomas. The expression on their faces shifted from concern to anger. Is this true, Richard? Uncle James demanded. Dad's face had turned ashen. Those emails are taken out of context. What possible context would justify this? Aunt Sarah asked, her voice trembling with anger. You tried to steal Eleanor's legacy to her daughter. It wasn't stealing, Dad insisted, his voice rising. Family helps family. Eleanor would have wanted. Don't you dare presume to know what my sister would have wanted, Uncle James interrupted. Eleanor set up that trust specifically to protect Samantha's future, including, apparently, from you. I reached into my briefcase one final time and removed a sealed envelope my mother had left with her will. I had never opened it before now. My mother left this letter to be read if there was ever any dispute about her intentions for the inheritance, I explained. Martin has kept it secure all these years. With steady hands, I broke the seal and unfolded the letter. To whom it may concern, I read aloud. If this letter is being read, then questions have arisen regarding my wishes for the trust fund I've established for my daughter, Samantha. Let me be absolutely clear. This money is for Samantha's future alone. It is not meant for Richard, any future spouse he may have, or any step-siblings Samantha might acquire. While I hope Samantha will always be generous of spirit, I do not expect or want her to compromise her financial security for others' benefit. I paused, my voice catching slightly before continuing. I have provided separately for Richard through life insurance and our shared assets. If he has mismanaged those resources, that is not Samantha's burden to bear. My daughter deserves the chance to build her life on solid ground, free from financial pressure or manipulation. This is my final wish as her mother. Eleanor Reynolds. Silence filled the room as my mother's words hung in the air. It was as if she were there with us, standing protectively at my side. Dad stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Diane looked furious, but remained silent. Rebecca appeared shocked that their scheme had collapsed so completely. I believe this meeting is over, Martin said quietly. Not quite, I responded, gathering my documents and returning them to my briefcase. There's one more thing. I addressed my father directly. You have 24 hours to withdraw the guardianship petition. If you don't, everything I've shown here today goes to the district attorney's office. The forged psychiatric evaluation alone constitutes fraud. The emails show premeditation. Dad's head snapped up. You wouldn't. I absolutely would, I assured him. I've spent most of my life trying to earn your approval, even after you made it clear I would always come second to Rebecca. I'm done with that now. My mother protected me the best way she knew how. I won't dishonor her by failing to protect myself. I stood, suddenly feeling lighter than I had in years. This is the end of our relationship, I told him. Not because you wanted my money, though that's certainly unforgivable, but because you were willing to have me declared mentally incompetent to get it. You would have destroyed my reputation, my career, possibly my entire future. I looked at Diane and Rebecca. You two are equally culpable. You've benefited from my father's financial support for years while treating me like an outsider. Now you plotted to take the one thing my mother left me. I turned to the rest of the family. I'm sorry you were dragged into this deception. Thank you for being willing to hear both sides. With that, I walked out of Aunt Sarah's house with Martin beside me. I didn't look back to see their reactions. I didn't need to. For the first time in over a decade, I had spoken my truth and stood my ground. The burden I hadn't even realized I was carrying, the desperate need for my father's approval, the hurt of being replaced, the doubt about my own worth began to lift with each step I took. I had faced my worst fear, complete rejection by my remaining parent, and survived. Not only survived, but emerged victorious and on my own terms. As we reached the car, Martin smiled at me. Your mother would be incredibly proud of you today, Samantha. I know, I replied. And, for the first time, I truly believed it. The aftermath of the family confrontation unfolded quickly. Dad withdrew the guardianship petition the next morning, just as I had demanded. No apology accompanied the withdrawal, just a terse email from his lawyer confirming it was done. I hadn't expected an apology. People capable of such calculated manipulation rarely have the self-awareness needed for genuine remorse. The withdrawal itself was victory enough. Diane attempted to reach out a week later with a text message that managed to be both conciliatory and accusatory. We only wanted what was best for the family. Someday you'll understand. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, should remain ashes. Rebecca's approach was more direct, anger unleashed through a series of increasingly hostile voicemails. You've ruined everything, she railed in the final message. Dad and Mom are fighting constantly. The bank is threatening foreclosure, and somehow I'm the villain in this story. I blocked her number after that. Her problems were no longer mine to solve. With the legal threat neutralized, I could finally access my inheritance as my mother had intended. Martin helped me establish appropriate protections, creating a revocable trust, investing in diverse holdings to minimize risk, and ensuring everything was properly documented. The best revenge is securing your future exactly as your mother wanted, he advised. My first priority was purchasing a home, not an extravagant showpiece like my father's, but a modest 3-bedroom in a good neighborhood with a small garden my mother would have loved. As I signed the closing papers, I felt her presence strongly. This was the security she had wanted for me. Next came the business investment I'd been researching for years, a financial literacy program for young adults transitioning out of foster care. Having witnessed firsthand how financial manipulation could damage lives, I was passionate about empowering vulnerable young people with the knowledge to protect themselves. Your mother's legacy extending to help others, Martin observed when I shared my plans. Perfect symmetry. The remaining funds I invested conservatively for long-term growth. No flashy purchases, no extravagant lifestyle changes. The inheritance wasn't about luxury, it was about stability and opportunities. Financial decisions made from wisdom, not emotion. As I established my new normal, unexpected relationships blossomed from the ashes of conflict. Uncle James and Aunt Sarah, who had drifted from my life after Mom died, became regular presences again. We met for Sunday dinners, shared old family stories, and slowly rebuilt connections that had been severed. We should have tried harder to stay in touch after Eleanor died, Aunt Sarah admitted during one of our dinners. We let Richard push us away when you needed family most. We all did what we thought was best at the time, I assured her. What matters is that we're here now. Cousin Patricia, who had successfully fought off my father's attempt to take her inheritance years earlier, became an unexpected mentor. Having experienced similar betrayal, she understood the complicated emotions I was processing. The hardest part is accepting that they will never acknowledge the harm they caused, she told me during one of our long phone conversations. Your healing can't depend on their recognition of wrongdoing. She was right. I gradually stopped watching for signs of remorse or regret from my father. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life and sense of self without him in it. The professional consequences of the conflict were surprising. Rather than damaging my career, standing up to my father's manipulation actually enhanced my professional reputation. My boss, who had provided a statement supporting my mental competence, gained new respect for my resilience. Take serious backbone to handle personal trauma while maintaining your professional responsibilities, she commented during my next performance review. Those are exactly the qualities we look for in leadership. 6 months after the confrontation, I was promoted to senior financial analyst with my own team to manage. My personal growth was more subtle but profound. The experience had forced me to set boundaries, speak my truth, and trust my own judgment, skills I had suppressed while seeking my father's approval. I became more discerning about relationships, more comfortable stating my needs, and more confident in my decisions. Therapy helped tremendously. Dr. Jenkins, who had assessed my mental health during the legal battle, became my regular therapist. With her guidance, I worked through the complex grief of losing both parents. My mother to death and my father to his own choices. Family estrangement carries its own form of grief, she explained during one session. You're mourning the relationship you wished you had, not just the one you lost. That perspective helped me process my feelings without drowning in them. I allowed myself to feel the sadness of losing my father without questioning my decision to protect myself from his manipulation. 1 year after the confrontation, I received an unexpected email from Tyler, Rebecca's ex-boyfriend. He was in town for a job interview and wanted to meet for coffee. Curious, I agreed. Rebecca and your parents are getting divorced, he informed me once we were seated with our drinks. The financial situation got worse. They're selling the house, and Rebecca had to move into a studio apartment and get a real job. I felt a complicated mix of emotions, a flicker of satisfaction quickly replaced by sadness for the complete fracturing of what had once been a family. Are you telling me this thinking I'll help them? I asked directly. Tyler shook his head. No. I figured you deserved to know the consequences played out. You stood your ground, and they're facing reality for perhaps the first time. He paused. I admired how you handled everything, to be honest. It made me rethink some things in my own life. As our conversation continued, I realized I felt no joy in their difficulties, but also no responsibility to rescue them. They were adults facing the natural results of their choices. That wasn't vengeance, it was simply the way life worked. By my 29th birthday, a quiet celebration with friends rather than family, I had established a new normal. My home was mine, my business investment was thriving, and I had created a chosen family of loyal friends and reconnected relatives. I thought often of my mother during this time of rebuilding. The inheritance had been her final gift, but the true legacy she left was the strength she had modeled throughout her life. Her quiet dignity during illness. Her foresight in protecting my future. Her unwavering belief in my capabilities. You're more like Eleanor than you realize, Aunt Sarah told me during my birthday dinner. She was steel underneath all that warmth. Just like you. It was the best compliment I could have received. The final piece of my healing came, unexpectedly, about 18 months after the confrontation. I was clearing out some old boxes and found a photograph I'd forgotten. My father and me at the lake when I was about 9, both of us laughing as we tried to bait fishing hooks. I remembered that day clearly. The sun warm on my shoulders, the comfortable silence between casts, his patient instructions as I struggled with the fishing line. For a moment, grief overwhelmed me. Not just for my mother, whose absence I had acknowledged and processed, but for the father I had once had and lost long before our final confrontation. Somewhere along the way, the man who had taught me to fish, who had cheered at my school plays, who had loved my mother, had disappeared. Whether consumed by greed, weakened by character flaws, or transformed by Diane's influence, that version of my father was gone as surely as if he had died. I allowed myself to cry for that loss, the complicated, messy grief of mourning someone still living but fundamentally changed. Not to excuse his actions, but to acknowledge the complexity of loving and losing a flawed parent. When the tears subsided, I placed the photo in a small keepsake box rather than returning it to storage or throwing it away. It represented a truth about my life. That love and betrayal can come from the same person, that good memories can coexist with terrible ones, and that acknowledging the former doesn't invalidate the pain of the latter. The inheritance my mother left had secured my financial future as she intended. But the true gift had been the strength I discovered in protecting it, and, by extension, protecting myself. I had learned that family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by respect, support, and love freely given. I had discovered that setting boundaries isn't selfish, but necessary for genuine relationships. Most importantly, I had realized that my worth was never dependent on my father's recognition of it. If you're watching this and struggling with family who see you as a resource rather than a person, who value what you can give them over who you are, know that you deserve better. Standing your ground may be the hardest thing you'll ever do, but also the most necessary. Your future self will thank you for it. I often wonder what my mother would think if she could see me now. I like to believe she'd recognize the daughter she raised, independent, resilient, and finally at peace with both her presence in my life and her absence from it. The money she left me provided security, but her example gave me something far more valuable, the courage to protect myself with the same fierce love she had shown in protecting me. Have you ever had to stand up to family who tried to take advantage of you? Share your story in the comments below. And if this video resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and growth. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is more valuable than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength and peace on your own journey.